Thank you for tuning into this video about criminal court cases. And we're going to dive in right away. Let's dive in by talking about the prosecution and the defense. Now, you know in a criminal case you have two sides, the prosecution and the defense. The prosecution goes by many different names. You got the prosecuting attorney. You could call it a state prosecutor. You could call it a district attorney, a county attorney, a city attorney. There's so many different names you could call this district attorney. Probably the most common is DA or district attorney. In Wood County, we call it a district attorney, and it's in charge of this county. You certainly could call him the county attorney, but district attorney is the appropriate title for our current DA. And the DA is in charge of representing the government. It's representing the government and bringing charges against people. And this could mean a lot of different cases, so a lot of cases they got to handle. And they give the district attorney a lot of autonomy and discretion. He can choose who he wants to bring charges against. Now, certainly he has a team of other assistant DAs, about 3 or 4 in Wood County, and certainly a lot more in other counties. And they get to decide, is there enough evidence to bring charges against this person? Is it worthwhile to bring charges against this person? Is it worthwhile to try and come up with some sort of plea deal with this person? And they have all the resources of the state to try and do so. So they do have a budget to send stuff into crime labs. They do have, they have a lot of resources to do research and background checks to try and get information. They have contacts with federal agencies to get further information. And they have to use all that information to decide whether or not to go forward with a trial. Remember, you want to keep things functioning properly. In a bureaucratic world, you want to keep things functioning as smoothly as possible. So not every trial is going to go to an actual trial. Most cases where a DA is going to bring charges, it doesn't result in a trial. And really the DA can be very involved with negotiating in that way. Let's say you are wanted, you're charged with first-degree homicide, and the DA doesn't have a ton of evidence. He could, negotiate with you a plea deal in which you plead guilty, but you plead guilty to second-degree homicide. This would be a lesser punishment. You would not be up for life in prison, but it could be risky. You could have won against the DA. Maybe the DA would have lost and you would have been found innocent. But if you went forward with a first-degree homicide case, you could have been found guilty and sentenced for a long time. So a plea deal can be a really tough decision because it's risky. You're choosing to plead guilty in exchange for something, in exchange for a kind of a lifting of some risk in some other way. Now, the DAs are primarily elected, so we find people that we kind of trust to be in this position of authority because it is a very powerful position. And if they're not doing their job, they could be recalled and removed from office or just lose in the next election. Now, prosecutors themselves are pretty much crime fighters, and they need the police to help them out. Think about it. They need the police to collect information. They need the police to not mess up a crime scene, per se. So they need a lot of things to make sure everything functions all right. And the police need prosecutors as well. The police need prosecutors to put away criminals so they don't necessarily have to deal with them over and over again. It'd be a pain for a police officer to arrest someone only to have them out on the streets again very, very quickly. Now, defense attorneys. I always think have the most difficult job of all the lawyers. Think about it. If you're a prosecutor, it's your job to try and find that someone did a crime. It kind of feels like you're the hero of the story. You're trying to put away a criminal. Defense attorney, you are seen as someone that's protecting potentially a criminal. You are seen as someone that, in fact, you might know that your client is completely guilty, and you have the job, the duty to protect them. It's your job to represent your defendant no matter how horrible the crime they did, and to try and help them out as much as you can, despite what you know. Now, the catch is defense attorneys don't have the resources of the state. So they often have to do their own investigations. They often have to communicate with the prosecutor and try and get info from them. They have to prepare their own case without necessarily all those resources and assistance. So they might be, underprepared compared to a prosecutor. They also don't necessarily have a good relationship with the police, where a police officer might be not wanting to help out a defense attorney. That's freeing someone that they arrested. That doesn't sound like something a police officer would necessarily like all the time. And defense attorneys are negotiating for their clients. They're trying to make sure that their client does not, face a harsh punishment or gets the best deal they can get. Now, sometimes people can't afford their own defense attorney, so they call in a public defender. And a public defender is someone that is paid for by the government, and it's their job to defend people that can't afford a lawyer or don't want to pay for a lawyer. But there's some issues with a public defender. Yes, it's a free lawyer, which can be a huge benefit, but they are a government employee, which kind of seems like a conflict of interest. You have a government employee facing off against another government employee. They also tend to have an unreasonable amount of cases. They tend to be overloaded at work. They tend to have difficulty keeping up with what case is what, which can be difficult for a lawyer that tends to be pretty new. It tends to be that public defenders are a job that a lawyer gets right out of law school. That they don't necessarily get hired by a law firm. They don't get hired to be a prosecutor. You tend to start off as a public defender if you don't get into one of those fields. So they could be the least qualified lawyers, and they could be the least experienced lawyers. Not to mention, public defenders get such a negative rap that people don't want to be a public defender. So you probably get the people that don't want to be public defenders. You probably get people that aren't as qualified, that aren't as experienced, and have an unreasonable caseload. These are not things that are, helping out your defense team here. They also tend to have pretty restricted budgets and salaries. So there's a lot of stuff that's kind of negative about having a public defender, even though it is a free lawyer. There's some drawbacks here. Now, last thing about lawyers today is about attorney-client privilege. And you kind of hear about it in TV shows and movies. And it's just the idea that anything you share with your lawyer is considered confidential. So you can share with them information about the case without them revealing it. You can certainly give them permission to reveal stuff. They're using strategy to try and win your case. So some of that stuff they might say, we have to bring this out. But there is some exceptions. For example, in a case, U.S. versus Zolan, you don't need to know the name, but you should know kind of the result. Attorney-client privilege does not count for a crime that's not yet committed. So if a client were to come to their lawyer and ask them questions about a crime they're planning to commit, the lawyer could just go tell the police, and that would be perfectly legal. It's only violation of attorney-client privilege if a lawyer shares information that was private about a past incident, about something that happened in the past. And this can actually get a lawyer to lose their license if they violate attorney-client privilege. It's considered one of the most important components of being an attorney. Now, feel free to leave me some questions about DAs and defense attorneys, and I'll try and help you out.